Actually, architecture is a form of art. So I decided to be an architect later, and then the role of architects I can see not as only an artist role, not only shaping the physical environment of the country, of the nation, but also has a more, I can say, political role, where architects actually contributing in the nation building. That is, for urban design projects, we have many challenges. Too much more in, I can tell you some for the projects we had done. Many people even don't heard about the word urban design. What is urban design? Beyond that, we have to think of public life for the citizen. So then we have to connect many social issues, environmental issues, and how we have to perceive how the city will grow, how the city will move forward. Those things, I think, is challenging, and there we can contribute. So while we were designing the Hathijil project, it was actually uncared. We most of the Hathijil area for a long period, it was abandoned area, and while we have started doing that, the project was taken as an infrastructure development project, mainly developing roads, drainage system, and water detention facilities. We wanted to connect the total city with this project through road network, through through connecting the open spaces and the surrounding area, connecting the open spaces. And we wanted to make a statement so that we can develop an example for experiencing water, experiencing the air, experiencing the open space, and we incorporated all the infrastructure elements in such a way that people can enjoy driving over there, walking over around that water body. They can spend their time over there, they can breathe over there. Those are the city needs. The Hathijil one, it is something we are recreating the nature, and the Nisarga is actually nature exists there. It is a protected forestry. The nature is preserved over there, and we are doing the intervention. That means my role is directly opposite over there, because Nisarga is an interesting project, a program developed by the forest department. There are many protected forestries. They wanted to preserve the forestry and protect the forestry from degrading. So they formulated an idea of ecotourism so that people can learn and get information about natural heritage, natural elements and biodiversity from there, and also they can be aware of the issue of how to protect the nature. What we did, we had to make a pavilion, we had to make a shelter for visitors, so we proposed an elevated floating pavilion so that we don't have to change the landscape over there, and the floating pavilion will touch minimum, will actually lightly will touch the ground, so the nature can be preserved, the landscape can be preserved, and also the natural environment, which include all the animals, all the biodiversity issues can be preserved, and animal can move around so that they can feel home, they can feel, they shouldn't feel like a human intervention will move them away from that area. You have to, as an architect who is actually creating an environment, You have to understand the locality, the location. That is very important. It doesn't mean only the site or a place. Actually, place will is the right word, I think. Place will tell you what to do. So wherever you are, it has to be over there. Then it will be sustainable. Otherwise, it will not be sustainable. Nowadays, in capitalist system, society have money. They can create artificial environment. They can bring everything from anywhere of the world. But to be sustainable, you have to think about for a gross whole nation, you have to think local. You can think global to understand the global issues, but when you are acting locally, wherever you are. So I always think like you can be a modern man, but you have to be a regional person.
Actually, architecture came later in my life. Painting, sketches, drawing, watercolor. This all came quite early. Probably at the age of 7, I started. Somehow I was in love with painting. So I started learning also. And I found when I used to go to outdoor sketches, I used to see the beautiful sky for example, in autumn or in monsoon. It's really dark, overcasted sky and changing sky. In the summer, I see beautiful flowers coming up, trees, the rows of trees, flaming red and all the other colors, yellow. So I saw these different things, and I wanted to capture all these things. It's also always in my mind, and I used to think how I can draw all these things. Sometimes line drawings, I was not happy with the sketches, the line drawings. Then I started putting watercolor, the red and the purple and the yellow. And look at Bangladesh, the watery, the swampy lands, and the trees, flowers, and the sky, moving clouds. So it's like to gather everything. So watercolor has the quality, if you put one color and then another color on top and another color on top, even you see the base color, even the paper, So this is how I was so interested in watercolor. I want to see beyond, always see beyond. I want to see the first, like a land, the whole atmosphere. So it's all just because of not only drawing, just to understand the surroundings, the environment, the people, their movement, and how the light casting shadow the other side of the thing. How the wind is moving, I can't draw the wind, but I can feel the wind. Even when I draw something, there's some sort of feeling of wind also there. Maybe it's communicated properly or not, I don't know. But that's not my business even. So I just do. That's my passion. First thing, I think I need to understand my limitation first. Who am I? How much I can do actually? Can I create something which is absolutely natural? No, I don't have that power actually. I understand my limitations. I can produce geometry. I know the measurements. I know the proportion. These are the things I understand. So I can produce using all those things, geometry, proportion, and then that's supposed to be absolutely opposite to the nature, probably. And I'm happy because of my contradiction that I'm intervening the nature in a way that is like very boldly, not just like in a most humble way. It's not actually. I know I love nature, but I'm intervening nature very in a robust way sometimes. So that's supposed to be my contradiction, but that's my happiness also, because I'm creating something which is absolutely mine, So this is sort of very interesting, humble ego issue here. And I think architects should have ego issue, because they are one individual person who is creating something. So create your own thing, and then you put it on the ground, and the ground is absolutely organic. Now the question comes in between ground and building, how you're connecting together. Is it harming each other? Is it, complementary to each other? Now question comes, you need to understand the whole ambience, the atmosphere, how the sun is moving, how is the winter is going incline on the south, how it started from the northwest, northeast to southeast in different times, and how wind is coming, And then you need to understand the materiality. Which material is the best for this sort of ambience? How much they can take the load? How much you can carry the span? All the issues come, in between to connect your creation and the organic landscape. And the whole architecture, because it started in the joineries, actually, how you're connecting with the land, this thing. And how you're connecting with the wind and the sunlight and all other things, the sound of birds and the trees and other things. So I think that's the challenge, all the joineries, Not only visual joineries, maybe invisible joineries with the wind and sun and light and things like that. So I think this is how I love to work. This is very clear that imagine something is like beautiful landscape, and there is no one simply, and there will be no one ever. There's no existence of human being, and there's no human being actually around. So this landscape is basically meaningless. Who's going to appreciate the landscape? So you have to have somebody there who can appreciate. Probably human being is the best animal who can appreciate the landscape. Once that's the first intervention, the human being is there. They started then because they can think, human being can think. So started thinking that he needs some support when the storm is coming. He needs to, save himself or herself from the storm or thunderstorm or any sort of danger, basic shelter to protect. That starts, architecture from there. Maybe a cave, whatever, That's the starting point. So you have started the intervention, which is absolutely beautiful until and unless you are not truly destroying the nature up to that level that the nature now started destroying you. So that's the balance actually, to understand the balance. And that's the soul of architecture. When you lose the soul of architecture, then it's really a damage, serious damage. We can produce city. We can produce, the urbanity, urban spaces. It's not something like you're doing some crime. You are doing something for humanity. You're creating something for the people, for your society. That's fine. But whether the question comes, whether you have lost the soul of the nature and soul of architecture, because these has souls come together and creates the livable space. Look, architecture is like many other creative field. It's one creative field that we can struggle, we can work on. It's not something that absolutely different from all other creative fields. Just like all other creative fields, you need to really work hard. First thing, for example, Aurélien Lemonier is a European writer who is a fantastic writer who wrote that if you want to be creative, you have to take decision. You write down that I want to be creative. The first decision. So young architects, youngsters need to take decision that they want to be creative. They want to be an architect. And then the struggle starts. The knowledge, perseverance, and implementation. It's not just knowledge. You have a knowledge, but you don't have perseverance. You're not struggling, nothing will happen. You're struggling, you have knowledge, but you don't know how to transform things, how to implement things and make it in reality as you thought about it. Just like Glenn Market, the Australian architect, he says, you start the work in such a way that how you want to finish it. And that way you start work. So even your starting and ending is like a intense of the work should be remain same. It's not something like it started with high ambition and then gradually disappearing and you ended up frustrated. It's not like that. So it's a very difficult job. Keep it up in one line and start it and finish it up close to your dream. So it's all hard work. It's not magic.
Okay, so primarily I think Bangladesh is just beginning to rise in terms of development, in terms of the built heritage, the new built heritage. And so I think the role of the architect is manifold. It's not just designing buildings, designing aesthetics. I think the architect is a cultural person, as you say, is a cultural entity. Is also a social being, and in a country like Bangladesh, which is in a social flux, so to speak, with the changes in economics, with the changes in development, I think the architect is very much a social being, in the sense he needs to, or she needs to understand or try to understand the changes in the society, bring it to the forefront of the discussion, and then try to design or try to present to the public spaces not only for today but also looking back at the past, because there is a rich heritage here, looking back at the past and then move it to the future. Today, I think the changes in the society are also should be reflected in the architecture. So in positive ways, you see, if people have money, for example in real estate, which is a speculative section of architecture, so while they may have money, I think the money needs to be appropriately placed. So not only just money, but resources, which means time, power, energy, all these things I think needs to be placed in a context. So I think there is the sense of responsibility. So just because you have a lot of money does not mean one is to be superfluous, or does not mean one is to build in a way or make buildings which are very costly, let us say, which is difficult to maintain, which are difficult to run. And there are examples all around the world. It's not just in Bangladesh. The lives of people are affected, are impacted by architecture. So even if it's just a room, from a room to a public space, to an urban space, to a city, I think at every level, the people's lives are affected. And the way a child grows up in that space, the way people live, interact with that space, I think all of that are very universal. In Bangladesh, it's especially so because it's a small country with a large population. It's a densely populated country. And so therefore space, I think, is a very important resource here. And this resource needs to be used very wisely and very carefully. And therefore, whatever public spaces can be created in this dense urban fabric, I think these need to be looked at very carefully. So let me just say that we have talked about, Corbusier saying towards a new architecture, but an urbanism. But I say, can we think about ruralism? You see, most of the people in Bangladesh live in the rural area, but they need not really migrate to urban areas to find work. So there needs to be, I think, a change of vision about the way we look at urban and rural areas, because if you look at it, the life in rural areas are very rich. It's a very natural way of life. It's clean air, pure water, and a lot of accepting certain facilities and amenities that we find in urban areas like schools, medical care, etc. So how to come to a point where the both can merge, so that people don't have to migrate to cities, but rather the rural areas themselves can be a place where not only they can live but also continue through generations, being in a modern connected world, because now we have the internet and other communication facilities. So for me, it was always very important to be in the rural landscape as an architect, because in the urban context there are certain things I think that is not working. Personally, for me, it's not working in Bangladesh because of the densification, but not really enough public spaces. So that I could find in the rural spaces, in the rural areas. You could find space, you could find enough openings, enough air and water and landscape, and light. So the rural projects for me is a way to give back to society some of the things that I've been thinking about, which I would love to do in an urban situation also, perhaps not in the similar way, but in a more, perhaps in a more dense way, truly, but which I would like to do, but it's not possible. But in the rural experiment for me is very important in the sense to try to understand how societies in rural areas or villages can move very slowly, very carefully into an area where it is neither rural nor urban. So a new kind of ruralism. So that is why the Friendship Center, I think, was for me a very interesting study, where it is in a very agricultural landscape, but again, once you enter, it's very, let's say, built up. It's not urban, but it's not village-like. It doesn't have sloping roofs and all that sort of thing. So it is not trying to mimic. It is about trying to grow from the land, but try to grow in a way which is conducive to this merger that I'm talking about, this merger of the rural and the urban. Sustainability, I think today is sometimes a buzzword. I think sometimes it's more fashionable than it's a real solution. And that is a pity, because throughout the world, all the societies, villages, people lived in a sustainable way. They did farming in a sustainable way. They did forest deforestation or felling of trees in a sustainable way. They felled one tree, they planted another. But this is not happening anymore. So that is why we have this global crisis. I think for me, sustainability is a way that is long-term, that you work with nature, that you live with nature, as opposed to trying to sort of control nature or trying to reshape nature. Yes, we need more production. There are more people today than there was 50 years ago or 100 years ago. I understand that, but sustainability has also to do, many times I think overlooked, but has also to do with economics. So we can bring down energy consumption using solar panels, but solar panels are expensive. So we can have the whole building running on solar panel, but where is the economic sense in it all? So if you bring economics in, the idea of economics into sustainability, then making an expensive building in the first place is the wrongest thing to do. So how to optimize building costs, how to optimize running costs, how to optimize maintenance costs. These are all parts of sustainability. There are always going to be new buildings, and all buildings need not be architecture. Every building does not need to be a very designed something, you see. In some places, not everywhere, but in some places, I think the idea of spirituality is important. In the mosque, although it's a religious space, but for me it was more important that it had a certain connection to the above, to zenith, to the landscape. So that's why it's open horizontally, and then there's connection with the z-axis, which is the zenith, and to the skies and the heavens. So I think spirituality in that way is very important for me. And in some of projects, I think we don't always need to be very enigmatic. Architects don't always need to be very enigmatic. They don't need to be very super creative all the time. I think they also sometimes need to be very toned down, in the sense, just think about the person who is going to enjoy that space, who is going to interact with that space, the little child who is going to be there, to be in that space, to be in that wonder of that space. And for me, all those little things are very important. And that is what I try to sort of pursue in terms of the aesthetics of architecture.